Hi friends, I'm Jeff E.G. I've been a big fan of Riffler for quite a few years. I think it's just one of the best guitar riff and guitar instruments that you can use. It was initially released for iOS, but there's a beta version available for Mac and Windows as well, which is good news. What I like about it is that it's not just a creative tool for creating guitar riffs, but you can write entire songs, and you can use it as a MIDI generator for other instruments. It's very effective, it sounds good, and it's kind of fun. In this video, I'm going to do three things. First, I'm going to show you how to use it in Logic for iPad. Number two, I'm going to do a brief tutorial on the features that are in Riffler. And number three, I'm going to give you some advice on how to use it as a songwriting tool. Just some techniques that I've learned over the years. If you've been on this channel before, you know that I've made some videos about Riffler in the past. I'll create those links in the description for your convenience. There's more than one way to load Riffler into Logic Pro. If you're starting a new project, open up Logic Pro on your iPad, click on the plus sign up at the top, and create a new tracks project. Then select Pattern. These are the different types of tracks. You can add a MIDI, audio, drummer, or pattern track. We're going to choose Pattern to add an AUV3 instrument. And under Patch or Instrument, we're going to click the drop down, look at the various instruments. By default, it shows you the Logic instruments. And then below that, it's got all the AUV3 instruments that you may have downloaded and installed on your iPad. You see I have a few. One of the ones I use is Riffler. Then we're going to create that track. And once the track is created, we're not going to use the step editor right away, so we'll turn that off. And we'll look at the plugin itself, click on the plugin details, and open Riffler. And in here you can see sort of a bigger version of Riffler. We'll create a riff and click on play so we can hear it. So you can use that same technique for installing any AUV3. Now in Riffler, what you see in this reduced view is the standard Riffler interface, where it starts off by showing you presets, and you can choose any of those presets you want and play it. And then all of the parameters for controlling your riff are down here: key, field, touch, run, tone, tuning, time, drums, and MIDI. The presets are great, and there's lots of interesting things to choose from. So here we are using Riffler interactively. I turned on the loop feature, and if I play, so even though you're not seeing anything on that track, it is playing exactly what you've created here in Riffler, and you can zoom in or zoom out to see what that riff is. Now for the drums, I'm going to turn it off. And to turn off the drums, you just lower the volume down to 0. And then back up here in Logic, I'm going to add drummer. So I'm going to go to drummer, add a drummer track. And for drummer, I'm going to, controlling those parameters, I'm just going to listen to it. So now I'm hearing the drums here. I'm going to change that to, let's see, Britpop. Maybe change that to hard rock. And then I can change some of the parameters. So you could build your song from there. You can use your riff from Riffler as a starting point, add drums, add bass, add keyboards, everything that you would normally do in Logic. One other thing I want to show you is how you can interact in Logic with Riffler. And so we've seen the scenario where I select the Riffler track and I can see Riffler inside of Logic as an AUV3. And I can see my riff, which is 2 bars long. And when I play Logic, I get to hear track 1 and track 2. So even though you don't see anything in the track area for Riffler, like all AUV3 instruments, it's still going to execute what you see down here in the tablature view, right, which is a 2-bar pattern. Now the other option is you can export this as audio, and then you could cut and paste it around Logic. So let's give that a try. click on the settings, scroll down here a bit, and you'll see there's options to export audio or MIDI or export audio with a trail. I'm going to just export audio, and I'm going to put that into my downloads directory on my iPad, and it's going to be called C# chromatic 120 beats per minute, and I'm going to move that there. Now I'm going to open up the Files app on my iPad. If I do that, I should see an audio file there. Now, to drag that into Logic, a very important step is to change the view to either split view or slide over view. I like the slide over setting. Then open Logic. And in this mode, I can see both my Logic project and I can see files on my iPad. I'm going to add a new audio track. And I'm going to just click on the plus sign, choose audio. And what I have over here now is a blank audio track. And I can take the audio from my Files app and just drag it and drop it in here. Okay, and I don't want to hear the original riff from Riffler. I just want to hear the new track that I've put in. So there it is. And it's a 2-bar pattern. I can drag and drop that. I can make it wider or loop it. I have all kinds of options there. I can add effects like compressor, channel EQ. I have all the features available to me that are built into Logic. This comes in particularly handy if you have multiple riffs and you want to cut and paste them and move them around. But I'm going to demonstrate another way of doing that a little later in this video. Just starting Riffler, here's what it looks like. When I first got Riffler, I was using it with Beatmaker 3 and other software on iOS and found that I liked it best with AUM. But now with Logic Pro for iPad, I've been using it with that. And you can start Riffler in either a standalone mode or an AU version 3 plugin. And what you're seeing here is the standalone mode. When you first start it up, it'll show you presets. And there's quite a library. There's more than 200 combination of presets. So you've got categories on the left. So you choose rock preset and subcategories on the right. And you can click on create riff and listen to your riff. And what you're seeing is tabulature view of the riff up here. And you can see this one is made up of 4 bars. Riffler supports a maximum of 8 bars. And you can lock and unlock the bars depending on when you're going to be making change. Just sticking with the presets for a moment, you hear drums when you play a preset. If you go over to the drums page, you'll see you can control some things about the drums, the beat, whether it's just a click or a hi-hat. And if you want no drums, you just lower the volume down to nothing. Now if you play the riff, no drums. I like having the drums on, especially if I'm working on new riffs. Every time you click on Create Riff, you get another riff in the genre of the presets. So just looking at the showcase presets, clean arpeggios, and play. They sound great. If I hit Create Riff again, I get another riff kind of with the same 4 bars, similar feel. Just some different notes. There's some really fun presets down here. Creepy, what does that sound like? You can see that the creator had a sense of humor. Bet you can't play this. Yeah, probably not. There's also a random button up at the top. You click on random, it ignores the presets and comes up with a totally random new. Or random again, actually. It's a lot of fun to get familiar with what's there, I find anyway. Okay, that one is pretty complicated. These buttons up here let you zoom in or zoom out, make it a little bit easier to see. You can edit individual notes. So this 5 note, currently the MIDI note G2. If you wanted to change that, you'll see it move. So that's pretty finite control that you can actually modify an individual note. Okay, the next tab is the key. You've got some preset chord progressions down here. The scale, in which case it's picking one of these scale options, blues, Phrygian, harmonic minor, chromatic, some progressions that are standard for rock, blues, metal, punk. Let's listen to the punk one. The last and most important thing, which I'll come back to in a second, is manual. When you click on manual, up at the top you see this breakdown of the bars where it has the chords listed. So it starts on F sharp, B, F sharp again, and another B. You could actually change these in manual to something else. So if you want that to be a G, the chord progression is going to change, and you've created a custom chord progression. Feel and touch and runs. These next 3 are parameters that influence the riff that's being created. How much melody, how melodic. You want something for, say, a rhythm guitar, you'll probably turn down the melody to fewer notes. And the range is how broad the notes are going to be played. And you can see here you go from very low notes to very high notes, because the range is set quite high. And how rhythmic is it? Is it lowly rhythmic or a lot of rhythm being involved? You could crank up the rhythm and you can see the notes change automatically. Gap is how much timing space is between these notes. Right now, because the feel is set to metal, it plays a lot of notes without much gap. And if you set that to, say, 16th notes and increase the gap, there's going to be greater space between some of the notes, and you can see that takes place up here, and it's going to sound different. And repetition is how much repetition of the pattern do you want? For certain genres of music, you do tend to hear a riff with repetition. Maybe you like that, maybe you don't. You can control the amount of repetition. Under the touch, this is very much how it's played. And you know, on guitar, you can bend notes. So if you increase the number of bends, some of these notes are going to have bends. You've got vibrato. How much of it is chord-based, playing a whole chord. You can mute, sort of palm mute some of the notes, and it's going to sound different. And then runs are usually at the end of a bar or the end of 4 bars. You'll have like some crazy run, and you can control the range of the run, how many runs there are. I can lower that. If you increase the second end bar, every 2 bars you're going to get a little bit of a run at the end of that, and then same at the end of every 4 bars you can have. So these 3 sections, the run, touch, and feel, are all things that you can play around with to modify a preset, and that's the best way to go about it. Now, tone is something you'll use all over all the time. These are your amp presets. If you export the audio from Riffler, that's the amp sound that you're going to get. Tuning, this is how the guitar is tuned. Right now, this is tuned to the F-sharp model. These are all kind of standard ways of tuning a guitar. There's your drop D tuning. There's standard E. The timing of the song, most of the riffs default to a 4/4 pattern, but you can change the time signature to anything. There's really no limits. The most complex time signatures are available to you. We already talked about the drums being turned off or on. And then the last category is on how it exports MIDI. If you're using this to generate MIDI, on the MIDI out, you can control the channel, how much velocity is being sent via MIDI, and the muting and voicing. This last button just reduces that menu so you can see the tabulature larger or smaller. Then there are settings. If you click on the little gear up in the top here, obviously metronome and tempo are adjustable, but under the settings, these are all very interesting. They all do some interesting things. Locking and unlocking bars, lock them all, unlock them all. Scrolling, whether that's on or off. lining up notes during playback. This endless mode I'm going to cover later. Export, it's very important. You can export the audio or you can export the MIDI. With the audio, you're going to get the amp sounds and the drum sounds. So if you don't want the drums, remember to turn down the volume. The most important section I find here is locking features. So if you lock the key and the progression, you might say, well, why would I do that? So you might have multiple riffs that you create, one for a verse, one for a chorus, and one for a bridge, and maybe a lead thing. But you want them all to be in the same key using the same chord progression. They'll all work together. You may want to keep the tuning the same, the tempo the same, the range. These are all parameters that you can lock. And that comes in very handy if you have multiple instances of Riffler all running at the same time. Okay, the last thing here, you can save your riff, of course. Saving and managing them in a folder so you can retrieve is different than exporting. When you click on save here, you're saving all the parameters, everything, which preset you're using, the key, the feel, touch, runs, all the mods that you've made to come up with the riff. They're all being saved in this Riffler project. Let's call it a project. And one of the reasons I like Riffler so much is it feels like the developer anticipated everything a guitar player would modify. The key, the feel, the touch, number of runs, bends, tone. But I like the amps. I like the tone. I think it's pretty good. One of the cool features is called endless mode. So what I have here is a 4-bar riff. You can see it's 4 bars long. And if I play it over the course of 8 bars, it's just going to repeat those 4 bars again. So let's listen to it. So one of the features is called endless mode. If you go into settings, a couple different ways you can make use of this. Endless mode by default is on off. If you turn it on, the second time it plays those 4 bars, it's going to change the riff. And there's 2 options here, on and on with randomization. So let's listen to it with just on. And you'll hear the second 4 bars is a different progression than the first. It's similar, but different. And this comes in really handy. Let's say you have a lead guitar part, and the lead guitar solo, perhaps, is going to go over 16 bars. But you don't want it to just play the same 4 patterns over and over again. Let's listen to it on with randomization. Another scenario for your consideration is, let's say you don't like the amp sound or the sound of Riffler, but you still like the riff. So I've got an example here of like a funk riff. You can see down below here that it's a 4-bar riff and it's in the key of E. I'm not sure that I like the sound of it. I'm limited to the tone amps that are available in the preset, and you can play around with this a little bit. But let's just say I want to use some other instrument, maybe not even a guitar. Well, you can export the MIDI, go to the settings, which is the little gear on the top right, export the MIDI, and we're going to put that on my iPad, and you'll see here it's called E Mixolydian at 116, and we're going to open up the Files app. To drag that MIDI into Logic, you need to make the File app slide over. So we're going to be able to see 2 applications on my iPad at the same time. If you have an old iPad, it doesn't have this feature. If you have a fairly new one, say in the last 3 years, this should work just fine. And then we're going to open Logic again, and you can see MIDI file. I'm just going to drag that into Logic to an area where there is no track. It's going to ask me if I want to import the tempo. I'm going to say no. I've had trouble with it mixing up the tempo. I'm happy with the 116 beats per minute. Now by default, that MIDI pulls up the Steinway grand piano. And that's fine, but what we might want to do is change the sound. Suppose I choose marimba. So I'm using MIDI that was generated by Riffler, but I'm picking a sound that happens to exist in Logic. And this could come from anything. It could be one of the delivered Logic sounds, or it could be from a third-party instrument. In this scenario, I've got 3 Riffler parts that I've created. 3 instances of Riffler all running in the same Logic project. And this is a good example for songwriting. This ARP guitar was kind of the main riff. And you can see it down here. I'll just make this a little bit bigger. It's a 4-bar riff, and it starts off in F sharp minor, goes to a D and an E, so it's got some melodic quality to it, and it's using the clean arpeggio preset. I copied that into this next part, which up here is like a plunky little guitar part. And I added a bass part. And then I added drums with the drummer. So this is an example of a song that I'm using Riffler multiple times. If we take a look at the Riffler instance for the bass part, one of the things that made it sound bassy was choosing this synth FM bass preset for the tone. So I'm achieving different parts, bass, plunky, rhythm, lead, just by modifying the parameters within Riffler. I also added a MIDI part here at the end where I just exported the MIDI and chose a different pad. And you'll hear that's very similar to the arpeggiated guitar. But together it has a really great sound. Let's hear the whole thing one more time. Just gives you an idea of what you can do in the songwriting realm just with Riffler. On a Mac or Windows PC, there's a lot of plugins and virtual instruments that mimic guitar. But when you get into the iOS world, there's less to choose from. Still, I think Riffler has gone a long way to identify all the parameters and elements that relate to creating a guitar riff and how to use a riff in a song. If you found this video useful, click on the subscribe button, leave me a comment, and click on like for sure. That helps me show up in the YouTube algorithm. And as always, thanks for watching.